veteran. Oops.
We'll just move out of the fire zone.
Yeah.
You all set?
Before we start,
Could you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Norman, could you please state your full name for the record?
The full name is Norman A. Herring.
And what is your address?
City Hall, 102.
Lucerne in Maine, Poplar Road.
Okay.
You want the mailing address?
No, that's fine.
Just checking.
Norman, I'm Michael Popkin, an attorney. I'm here representing Leola Cochran in the lawsuit of Leola Cochran versus Paul and Owen Pollard, which is now pending in the federal court in Bangor. And we're here to take your deposition today. Have you ever had your deposition taken before?
Not in relation to the case that we're working on now.
But you have been to civil depositions?
Yes, back in the military.
Okay, well, I'll go over, that was some time ago, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so let me go over a few of the ground rules. What we're doing is making a verbatim record and a videotape record of your testimony in this case, which can be used under certain circumstances in this proceeding, this lawsuit. This is testimony that's taken under oath. We are then able to see and hear what you have to say and proceed accordingly in this case. Because we have a court reporter here taking this down, there's a couple of ground rules we have to follow. One is that you should answer the questions verbally rather than by sort of nodding your head or saying uh-huh or uh-uh, because that makes sure that we have a good written record of your responses. Is that clear?
Yes, I understand that.
Okay. Another thing I'd like to establish is that if you don't understand a question, please tell me that you don't understand it rather than answering it. If you don't understand a question, I can always stop and rephrase it, or we can clarify what is being asked and what's being answered. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. At any time that you want to take a break, for any reason whatsoever, please say so. We can do that. You understand that?
Yes.
Okay. From time to time, Mr. Glazier, who is here representing the defendants in this case, or myself, when he is examining you, may make objections for the record. Those objections will be noted on the transcript and can be taken up later with the judge. If an objection is made, you should stop in order to your answer, in order so that the objection can be taken down by the court reporter. But then, generally, you may answer the questions. The objections are just there to be noted on the record. When one of us objects, that doesn't mean you can't answer. You just have to wait till the objection's been made. Go on. Okay?
Right. Understand.
Okay, is there any reason that you wouldn't be able to go forward and answer questions here today that you can think of?
No reason that I can think of.
Okay, you're not taking medication or somehow confused or overtired this morning?
No.
Okay, so you feel ready to go forward now?
Yes.
015 Ohio Street, Gary.
Norman, you are the former chief of the Dedham and Lucerne, Maine fire departments. Could you tell me briefly what your experience is in firefighting and what, basically how long you've been at it and whatnot?
Well, my experience in firefighting, I guess it would be fair to say, started at the top rather than at the bottom and working up. And it encompassed a period of 34 years.
Okay, and where was that experience gained?
Here in Lucerne and in the town of Dedham.
Okay, and what was your positions? What were your positions in these fire departments?
It's always been as chief.
Okay. During those 34 or 30-odd years, how many fires have you responded to? Approximately.
Well, I would have to say approximately probably 350, 375, somewhere around there.
Okay, what sort of formal training did you have during that period?
Well, as formal training goes, I have attended numerous schools covering different phases of firefighting, and some of them were put on by the
Fire Engine 6,
State Fire Marshal's Office,
215
some were put
Ohio
on by
Street
the
is office
State
of the B&A,
Fire Training Program,
Boston 10-3.
some were put on by the National Fire Academy.
The rating showing
We've had numerous, what you might call inter-county training sessions.
Have you, in fact, in the past, been an instructor in firefighting as well as a fire chief?
Yes, I was 22 years as a state fire training instructor.
And what were your duties in connection with that?
Basically, they were traveling on nighttime type courses throughout south, central, and eastern Maine, conducting courses in various fire departments on whatever subject material they requested.
Have you had any training in fire investigation as well as the suppression of fires?
Yes, as I previously mentioned, one of the courses that was put on by the State Fire Marshal's Office was a course in fire investigation, and also a course by one of their senior fire inspectors, a gentleman by the name of Dalby, put on a course in arson investigation, which I attended.
Okay. And in fact, is the fire station here in Lucerne in Maine named after you?
Yes, it is.
Of these 350 or 375 fires that you have responded to, about how many of those fires were in Lucerne camps?
I would have to guess that probably maybe 10 or 12.
Okay, and could you describe, for the record, what we're talking about when we say a Lucerne camp?
Well, as briefly as possible, when this village corporation was created, it was mandated that all structures be logged, and they were to follow one of 5 basic designs, of which this cottage here is one of them. And a log structure burns, there's no question about it. And one of the things that I noted in these Lucerne log cabin fires was the fact that they don't burn as quickly as most people think. That is, assuming it's an accidental type fire. And
Well, I'm going to object.
yes.
Perhaps that's really not responsive. Maybe if you ask specific questions, maybe you could better.
You can complete your answer. The objection is noted.
Okay. Well, I don't know that I have anything further to
Okay.
say.
Now we'll go back to that subject. Okay, now, you realize that we are in this lawsuit litigating a fire that took place on or about February 18th, 1981, in which an individual died.
Yes.
Objection.
Do you have an independent memory of the events of that evening as you sit here today?
Well, yes, you use the word memory. That's exactly what it is.
Okay. Now, in preparation for your testimony here today, what have you actually reviewed in the way of documents?
Well, I've reviewed very little except what you've shown me.
Okay.
In the way of maps and Bangor Daily News clippings.
Okay. Now, you have not reviewed any reports or other sort of statements given by you to fire investigation officials or police officers, that is, authored by you in preparation for this testimony?
No, I have not.
Do you believe that you, in fact, made such reports, or do you remember making them?
Yes, I did.
Okay, who did you give reports to?
The basic report that I made out relative to the February fire, I gave to one of two people, and I cannot remember exactly to whom I gave it, but it was either Fire Inspector Ricker of the Fire Marshal's office or Corporal Schumann of the Maine State Police.
And you have never seen that report since, correct?
No, I have not.
Okay. And do you remember making out any other written reports in regard to this fire?
We made out, I made out a routine fire report at that time.
Okay, and what happened to that?
I expect that they were destroyed after a year's time because we did not have a filing system or a requirement for retaining them.
All right. Could you mark these in succession, please, just as, I guess, plaintiffs 2, 3, and 4. Supposed to be 3, 4, and 5, actually.
Yeah.
While we're off the record, I kind of marked 2. Okay, Norman, I'd like to identify a few documents with you or show you them to you. First of all, I'd like to show you what has been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibits 1 and 2 and ask if you can tell me what these are.
These are local tax maps of the Flatiron Maine Village Corporation.
And were you with me when we got copies of these maps at the Dedham town office?
Yes, I was.
Okay. I'd like to now show you what has been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit number 3 and ask if you can identify that briefly. We'll go into this a little bit later. I just want you to
Yes,
identify
I can identify it as a plan that I drew.
Okay. Of the camp where the fire took place?
Yes.
Okay. And I would like to show you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit number 4 and ask you what that is and when you first saw it or when you first saw it on a recent occasion.
This is a Bangor correction. This is a Ellsworth American news item.
No object to the exhibit in its entirety. But go ahead, yes.
Okay, go on.
That was put together by a Miss Jean Hay when she questioned me relative to the fire in question.
Okay. And did I show that to you this morning?
Yes, you did, sir.
And had you reviewed it at any other time recently?
No, sir.
Okay. And I'd like to show you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 5 and ask you to identify that if you can.
This would appear to be an extract of the report that I compiled immediately after the fire, which we discussed just previously, and to whom I did not know what went.
This is appears to be a Maine State Police report of Detective Herbert Schumann, in which you are quoted.
Objection,
yes.
it's leading, it's not responsive.
But you also, did you look at this morning? Did I show you this morning?
Yes, you did, sir.
And did you use it to refresh your memory regarding the times of the report and the arrival?
Objection, leading, non-responsive.
Oh, that is correct.
Okay. Now, have you reviewed any other documents in regard to this fire besides what is on the table in front of you marked as deposition exhibits by the plaintiff 1 through 5?
No, I have not.
Okay. And in preparation for your deposition here today, did you go out with me to the scene of the fire?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And that was on an occasion about more than a month ago?
Yes, I would say that's a reasonable time frame.
Okay. And other than what we have just spoken about, are you testifying here today from your memory of this incident?
Yes.
Okay, could you please tell me briefly, starting at the beginning of that evening of February 17th through 18th, 1981, what you recall about this fire?
Well, again, based on memory, I recall being awakened early in the morning by the fire alarm telephone, advising me that there was a fire in the structure on Sumac Road. And I immediately dressed and responded. And I was the first individual to arrive on the scene, and I reported back to headquarters, which is at the fire station, that I had arrived on the scene.
Excuse me, that was by radio?
Yes.
Okay, go on.
Then my first act, as I recall it, was to make a quick eyeball survey of the area to determine the extent of the fire and what exposures, if any, were involved or would be involved. And in doing so, I caught a view of an individual departing from the rear of the fire structure. Now that individual, it was impossible to identify the individual accurately because, after all, it was February, it was dark. The only light that was available was that from the burning camp. And I saw him moving away from the fire scene. And at the same time, or very nearly at the same time that I saw this individual, I recall seeing 2 5-gallon gasoline cans that were visible at the scene. And combining the 2 gas cans, the individual leaving the scene...
Objection. Please.
Yeah, he's made his objections.
Okay.
Do you want to state the grounds for the record?
Grounds is, you ask him to describe certain things, and I'm not going to have him go telling everything he knows. You can ask him questions and give answers.
Right. If you have, you can continue to answer, and we will go back over it.
Okay. So combining the gas cans of the individual leaving the scene and the rapid extent of the burn of the structure, I immediately arrived at the decision that this is probably an arson fire. And I called headquarters again on the radio and asked them to get in touch with Inspector Ricker to proceed to the incident scene as soon as possible. And in the meantime, the first due piece of apparatus had arrived on the scene, and I then became involved in laying out hose lines and getting water on the fire. My assistant chief, who was also a Hancock County deputy sheriff, arrived. I called him to my position where I was and explained to him that I had seen this individual
Objection,
leaving the
hearsay.
scene, and asked him to go and determine where that individual went,
Objection, hearsay.
which he did.
And you observed him do this?
Pardon?
Did you observe him go out and
My assistant chief?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
what did he do? What did you
He
observe?
went out in the direction that I indicated by pointing, and he picked up the footprints of the individual who was leaving, and then he disappeared from my view, and at that point in time I probably was concerned with firefighting rather than anything else.
Objection. Responsive.
Okay, and what happened next that evening that you can recall fighting the fire?
I was called back to the radio to be advised that Inspector Ricker was on his way to my fire, but had been asked to bypass it and go directly to the city of Bangor, where there was a fire involving fatalities at that
Objection.
same time.
Hearsay, not responsive. Excuse me, Mr. Popman, are you going to ask questions, or are you going to just let him go on with his own?
Well, I think he is responding. I want to get his narrative of what happened that night, and then I will go back over it with him. Your objections are noted.
Excuse me, sir. Narrative is one thing. What he's doing is something completely different.
Okay, can you tell me what, and your objections noted, Marvin. Can you tell me what happened next after you were informed about Inspector Ricker's plans to arrive at the scene?
We continued with firefighting. The objective was to put the fire out, and that's what we did.
Okay, now, can you tell me what the weather conditions were that evening? Or that early morning?
No, I cannot describe them accurately except to say that there was no storm.
It was not snowing or raining at the time?
No.
What time do you believe you got the call?
Well, in looking at the newspaper clippings, it appears I got the call at 03:51 in the morning.
Are you talking about the newspaper clipping that you refreshed your memory with, or are you talking about Plaintiff's Exhibit number 5?
Well, let's say exhibit number 5.
Objection.
And is that consistent with your memory of when you got the call?
Yes, it is. I just recall it was damn early in the morning.
Okay, and about how long did it take you to arrive there?
Again, refreshing my memory from the exhibit 5, 4 minutes.
Objection.
Okay, do you believe that it was in fact that fast?
Yes, I do.
About how long after you arrived did you observe the figure moving away from the camp?
I would say perhaps 2 minutes.
Did you come in with your siren on and your lights flashing?
Yes.
What were the conditions on the ground at that point? I'm saying, was there snow on the ground, etc.?
There was a very small amount of snow on the ground at that time.
Did you strike that? When you first arrived, could you describe the fire itself that you observed?
Well, I observed a structure that was fully involved from one end to the other. And my first thought, I guess, was how did this happen? It's not normal for a Lucerne log cabin to be that fully involved.
Okay, now could you tell me in a little bit more detail what you mean by fully involved?
Can I use this structure here as a
I think
example?
the video will
all
show it, but perhaps not that well. You should probably explain as much as you possibly can.
Okay, the structure involved, as I mentioned earlier, was one of 5 basic designs, of which this one is one of them, where I live here, and it was almost identical to this structure. And all of that structure, that end, this wall, this end, and a portion of the firewall, including the roof, was fully involved.
Does that mean that it was all actively burning, very hot?
Actively burning.
Were the flames coming through the roof at that point?
Yes, they were definitely through the roof. But there
How-
was left of it.
Okay. How hot? Could you describe anything more about the height or the color of the flames?
There was and I'm going back to memory on this, but they were a pinkish red color, and again, as I recall, there was little or no wind. They were going pretty much straight up.
Were they bright?
Well, I would have to say that in some places they were bright, in other places they were darker color.
Okay. Now you said that the roof, what was left of the roof, following that up, was how much of the roof was consumed when you arrived?
Oh, I do not remember exactly.
But you're very clear that the fire was out through the roof.
Yes, very definitely.
Anything that you recall about whether the fire was out through the doors and windows or the condition of the doors and windows?
As I recall, the windows were non-existent at that time. The fire had already blown the glass out.
Okay. What about the size and speed of the spread of the fire? Is that something you can comment on at this point?
Objection. No foundation.
Yeah, it would be difficult to make any correct assumption there, because if the lady who reported the fire initially, if she saw it when it began, then there would be no problem. I would say it was an unusually rapid involvement. But I don't know how long it had been burning before she made the report.
Okay, so in terms of the size and speed of the spread that you observed, the whole camp was on fire when you got there?
Yes.
Was there any sort of further spread or that you observed while you were actually observing the fire?
Objection. Leading.
Well, the remaining pieces of walls and roof and so forth were consumed by the fire, or partially consumed anyhow. Our objective at the moment was to try to keep it from a small building that was right adjacent to the structure, which we were able to do.
Let me get this straight. When you came there, all 3 of the walls and the entire roof were actively burning.
Right.
Could you, now, I'd like to call your attention to Plaintiff's Exhibit number 3. Can you tell me whether you drew that diagram? I'm talking about the outline of the building now and the dimensions.
Yes, I did.
And when did you draw that?
I have the date on there of 24 December 1980.
Now, we'll come back to it, but there was an earlier fire in this building in December of 1980?
That's correct.
And you drew this at that time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There is a number of other notations on this document. In handwriting, there's a picture of a body by a door and some other notations. Are those in your handwriting?
No, they are not.
Okay. Do you know whose handwriting that is?
No, I do not.
Okay. So what would, on this exhibit, exhibit number 3, what is yours is the outline of the building and the dimensions, and some notations such as garage and storage and the date.
Right.
And the rest of this, the script writing here and whatnot is not your writing.
That is correct.
Okay, now,
Excuse me, please. I'm going to object again for the record as to deposition number 3, because I understood when it was first went in, this was something done by this gentleman entirely. I now find out that that's not correct, so I'm going to have that as a further objection to this deposition exhibit being used.
okay. Now, you just described then what is and what is not your writing and work on this particular diagram, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you, rather than to use this exhibit at this point, to draw for me on this piece of paper the outline of the camp.
That's just the basic outline.
Exactly. Okay, now was there a back entrance to this building?
Yes, there was.
Could you indicate on your drawing where that back entrance was?
It's approximately in this area here.
And you've made two small marks showing a doorway. Could you just write back door or something there? Can you describe whether that back door was flush to the ground or was elevated?
Oh, it was elevated.
About how high?
I would estimate about 4 feet.
Okay. Was there any cellar or any partial cellar under this camp?
No, there was not.
Was there a boiler room?
Yes, there was.
Could you indicate on the drawing where that was? Was that on the same ground floor as everything else in the camp, or was it any difference? Was there any difference in the level that was on?
The floor of the boiler room was at ground level. The roof of the boiler room I would say it probably was about 6 feet above ground level.
So this was a small sort of extension on the back of the building?
That's correct.
Projection leading, he doesn't describe it as that.
Okay. Well, is that an accurate statement that it was a small extension?
Projection, the witness
yes.
can testify to he saw it, not the attorney.
Okay.
Question.
Can you tell me anything more about it? For instance, did it have a separate roof? Did it have a separate roof line? Was it?
It had a separate roof as a result of the previous December fire, which is where the fire originated,
Okay.
which blew the roof off. And they had installed another, I would say, temporary roof.
Okay. Was there a front door to this building?
Yes, there was.
Could you indicate on your drawing where that was?
Approximately in this area here, and I will label it front door.
Okay. And could you also draw where the windows were and label them?
No, I cannot do that except by assumption,
Okay.
but I don't remember.
Do you remember whether or not there were windows to this building?
Yes, there were windows in the building.
Okay. Do you know? Can you tell us anything more about which side they were on, or anything else?
Well, indicating a north and south arrow. There would have been windows on the northwest side. That I'm fairly sure. And I am guessing that there are windows on the east side. But again, basing this structure on mine here, the windows are in the same location.
Now, was
Motion to strike anything after the word guessing.
okay. Now, this building was. What were the materials it was built out of?
But
What were the materials the building was built out of? In other words, was it boards? Was it 2x4s? Was it logs? Was it? You've already described something, but I'm just trying to. At some point, we're going to be using this in a proceeding in which we're not going to be able to point to this room, and you've been describing it as similar to your camp, and what I'm trying to get is some verbal description of what you mean by that.
well, the camp was entirely constructed of logs. And
Are these whole logs, big ones, small ones?
they were whole logs, and they varied in size from probably 6 inches in diameter to perhaps 10 or 12 inches in diameter.
Okay. Using this red pen that I give you, could you draw on your diagram where along the walls the heavy burn was?
I'm indicating the front porch here,
Okay.
and I will label it as such. I would say, from the best of my recollection, that this is the so-called heavy burn area. With a burn in all the rest of the area, but of much less severity.
Okay. Now, in the area you've indicated, strike that. Was the fire any heavier in the area you've indicated in any particular spot, or was it, can you say?
Objection, that's the word heavier. He knows
I could not differentiate between the severity of the fire in any one area. It was all pretty much the same.
Okay. Now, you said the roof was on fire. Did you have a chance to observe whether the interior of the building was also burning?
Yes, the interior was burning.
Okay. Could you describe for us, basically, the burn inside the structure?
I'm not sure I actually understand the intent of the question there.
Okay. You said that the walls were fully involved and the roof was burning. Was there a heavy fire or a light fire inside the structure? What could you describe it?
objection to the
I would say that
question.
it was heavy fire because the roof would have been collapsing onto the fuel load that was inside the structure.
Okay. Now, did you find any gasoline cans?
Yes, I did.
Could you mark with your pencil where you found the gasoline cans?
The distance in between where I have indicated the gasoline cans and the structure is not accurate here because there isn't room on the paper. But they were at a greater distance than this would indicate from the side of the camp.
Can you tell us about how many feet?
About 30 feet. approximately.
What, did you observe whether or not there was any fluid in those cans?
No, I did not.
What did you do? Did you do anything with the cans, and if so, what?
I took them into custody for that night when I was advised that Inspector Ricker would not be able to get to me right away, but realizing that they might later become evidence.
Objection, not responsive.
And then I turned them over to Inspector Ricker.
When did you turn them over to Inspector Ricker?
I don't remember if I turned them over to him that night, morning actually. On his way to Bangor, he stopped in momentarily to verify the fact that I had a fire and that it did appear to be an arson.
Objection, not responsive.
I can't remember if I turned them over to him then or if he told me to secure them and he would pick them up in the morning.
How long did Inspector Ricker stay at the scene that night?
Oh, I would estimate perhaps 20 minutes.
And when did you see him again at the scene?
Oh, I don't remember for sure, but I would say probably the afternoon of that day.
In other words, this fire was in the early morning hours and
Yeah.
the afternoon of that same day.
That same date.
Okay. How intense was the heat from this fire?
I couldn't say that it was severe because I rate heat as being either minor or intermediate or severe. I couldn't say it was severe because of the total involvement open to the air. The heat rises. So the heat present on the fire ground was probably medium.
Was there any special problems in the suppression of this fire?
No. No problems insofar as the fire. The problem was availability of water, which I solved by calling in mutual aid units from Orland and Holden, I believe.
Did Orland and Holland units in fact respond?
The Orland unit, I had requested a tank truck from them by radio to our headquarters. They responded to the scene, and I'm not sure, I believe the Holden unit responded to our station to stand by for what we call move up.
Did you need them to move up?
Yes, because I don't believe in an empty firehouse.
Okay, but they did not actually respond to the scene of this fire.
I don't recall that they did, no.
So you had one extra truck from another unit there.
Yes, in addition to the Dedham Fire Department.
Okay. How many trucks and what equipment did you have at the scene?
Objection is to relevance.
I believe we had five pieces of equipment total.
Can you tell me the names of any other firefighters you remember who were with you at the scene of this fire on that early morning?
Well, the driver of the first due piece would have been Bruce Blackmer.
Is he still living?
Yes.
Anyone else who...
I believe both of my captains were there. Would have been David Hamilton and Charles Tinto. They're both living, still in residence in town. And Frank Myatt, who replaced me as chief,
How is that spelled?
M-Y-A-T-T. He was a driver of the 2nd DEW unit. And I would suspect that Lieutenant Pelletier, Armand Pelletier, is the driver of the 3rd unit to respond. There were others, but I don't remember.
Okay. How long did it take you to put the fire out?
I don't remember. I made it a policy never to say that a fire was out. So I can't remember when we left the scene to return to the station. But it probably would have been around 6 o'clock. Would be my estimate.
Objection, motion to strike, not responsive.
Okay. Do you remember whether or not it was dawn yet when you left the scene?
I believe it was. Just beginning to be daylight.
Was there in fact a second sort of a garage on this property?
Yes, there was.
Could you draw in just approximately where that is?
You off the record for a second, please? I would remember.
Norman, on your sketch you have in fact indicated where the garage is.
Yes, I've indicated the garage on the easterly side of the structure.
And that garage, is that still standing there?
Yes, it is.
Was that garage involved in the fire that night?
No.
And did you make any efforts to prevent it from being involved?
Yes, we did.
What did you do?
Well, realizing we're limited water supply, I immediately put a hose line between the garage and the involved structure in an attempt to keep the fire from extending to the exposure.
Okay, and did you wet it down?
Yes, we did.
Okay, also, for the record, we have now marked your sketch as Plaintiff's Exhibit number 6. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, and that is the sketch that you're making.
that's right.
Could you, for the record, you have never, to your knowledge, met or seen Paul Pollard, who's the defendant in this suit?
To my knowledge, I've never seen the individual.
Okay. Can you give us any further description of the individual who you saw that evening leaving the scene?
Objection to the characterization of leaving the scene. Go ahead and answer.
Now, the only thing that I can say about the individual was, as I momentarily saw him, and I'm assuming that it was a male, moving away from the fire, just for a very brief period of time in the glow of the fire. He appeared to be, as I recall at the time, picturing him as a young man. I couldn't even begin to estimate his height or his weight. He did have some either very dark hair or else he had some kind of dark colored head covering. And again, as I recall, he seemed to be doing something with his hands as he was moving away from the burning structure. I would liken that to an individual who is washing their hands. again, that was a very brief view that I had of the person.
How was the person walking, or how quickly were they moving?
He was, I'd have to say, walking rapidly.
Could you tell from any action of this individual whether or not they were aware of you?
Objection.
No, I couldn't tell that he was aware, but it was obvious to me that he was.
Objection.
Go on. Why?
It's not possible for 5 pieces of fire apparatus with red lights and sirens and a chief's vehicle to arrive on the scene without the individual being aware of it, unless he was unconscious.
You've already testified that you sent Elmer Alto to investigate the tracks that night.
Yes.
What did you do personally to investigate the tracks at any point?
That same day, but later in the morning, that I was back at the scene. My assistant chief and I went over and followed the tracks again. He had not been able to follow them all the way in the darkness when he got away from
Objection.
the period of the area covered by the glow of the fire. But we followed those tracks through the woods up to a point where they suddenly made a left turn and moved down through the woods towards the old highway, which is indicated on...
Okay, we'll get to that in a moment, Norman. When you said that he had not been able to follow the tracks in the night, is that something that he told you that night?
I suspect he did.
Okay. Do you...
And we should differentiate between night and morning here now.
Okay. About what time was it that you went back out to look at the tracks with him?
Probably 8 o'clock.
Okay.
A correction on that. In addition to his many duties, he was also a school bus driver.
This is Elmer Alto?
Yes,
That's A-L-T-O?
that's correct.
Elmer is now deceased.
Right.
He died several days after this incident?
Objection. Relevant.
Okay.
So it had been a little subsequent to 8 o'clock that he and I followed those tracks out.
Okay. And do you recall whose idea it was or how you came to be out there with him again that morning? Or why?
Well, I suppose it was my idea.
Objection. Everything after this. Over.
I had asked him to find out, or to follow this individual, and well, since he was not able to do it completely that night, again, that morning, I went out with him, because I wanted to see it myself.
Objection. I want the entire answer stricken based on
Okay.
hearsay.
Well, you have just described for me, have you not, the reason why you went out there the next
Yeah.
morning? All right. Before we finish with deposition exhibit number 6, I wonder if you would just somewhere here put your initials on it and the date. All right. Now, Norman, on these tax maps of the town of Dedham, starting on plaintiff's exhibit number 1, do you know where on that exhibit the property is that is the subject of this lawsuit, the place where the fire was? Can you locate that?
Oh, that would be shown on this tax map, which is Exhibit 1, as Lot 70.
Okay. And can you, let me just see, this is submitted. Can you just make an X there to show, or even, you might even draw in the structure on Lot 70 insofar as you can, roughly?
Well, it would have to be an estimation.
Right.
Well, we want the garage too.
Yes. Now, when you followed those tracks the next morning, were there clear tracks in the snow, or was there anything to follow?
They were not absolutely clear because, as I had already indicated, there was only a light coating of snow, as I remember. And there were places where there were no snow, or was no snow. But the leaves were broken, which would indicate where an individual had stepped. And we followed those tracks that were visible.
Now, are you able to tell me whether or not those tracks were made by an individual who was wearing boots, or whether there was anything about them to indicate that someone did not have shoes or did not have one shoe or anything like that?
Well, the tracks indicated that the individual had footwear on both feet.
Is there any doubt in your mind about that as you stand here today?
No, sir.
Can you now for me on this map, which we have marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit number 1, and if necessary overlaying it with Plaintiff's Exhibit number 2, draw the route that those tracks went that you followed? Why don't we do the overlay first, since the map's done?